Hey guys, MoiDawg here, and today I'm going over my top infantry tips to help you be a better squad player. These are things that I see players mess up all the time, so hopefully these tips will make it easier to get around the map, find the enemy, and understand what's going on around you. But before we dive into that, I want to remind everyone that I stream a lot of squad on Twitch, at twitch.tv/MoiDawg. I squad lead, run vehicles, and play practically every kit in the game. So if you have any questions or just want to watch some squad live, come hang out with us. And if you're still looking to pick up squad or other tactical shooters, don't forget to check out my official game store at moidawg.gg, where your purchase supports me directly. The single most asked question I get is, how do I see people that are shooting at me? And although I could go into detail about strategy, the answer is usually not related to things happening in-game, but your settings. In most FPS games, you want to increase your field of view as high as possible so you can see more of what's around you. But in squad, this actually makes it harder to see. Comparing the base field of view of 90 to 120, it's obvious that you can see more with the higher field of view on your sides, but this also creates a fishbowl effect, which distorts things on your left and right and actually shrinks the things in front of you. This will also affect your sights when you ADS. With 90 field of view, although the 100-meter targets are still small, we can see them relatively clearly. And when we ADS, the optic fills nearly our entire screen with the zoomed in reticles and targets as we'd expect. When we swap to 120 FOV, however, the optic is a fraction of our screen, making it almost impossible to read the reticles and extremely difficult to see the enemy. I strongly recommend having either the default 90 FOV or going no higher than 95 FOV. Anything more than that and you'll start getting problems when trying to see the enemy. Now that you have proper FOV, when enemies are shooting at you, I rely on audio and my map to pinpoint a location. If your computer is able to run epic audio quality, you'll get much better directional audio, allowing you to get a general idea of where the shots are coming from. After that, I then open my map to see if any marks have been placed or if friendlies are looking in a specific direction as well. Now, this may be an unpopular opinion, but this is why I like to have arrows for players instead of viewing kit rolls as player icons. On your map, you'll see a cogwheel, and in this drop-down menu, you'll see the toggle viewing roles as player icons button. I see a lot of screenshots and video of players who have this toggled on, and although it may be nice to see who's near you, it does absolutely nothing to help your situational awareness. With this option toggled, I can't tell which way my teammates are facing, and if I need to try and quickly find a target, I no longer have a point of reference if I look at my map. Additionally, as a squad leader, I like to make callouts that can help specific people, such as on your left or right. By having the arrow, I can tell exactly where someone is looking at, and this can help them get a jump on the enemy. When it comes to moving around the map, I always see people making the obvious routes to breach or flank. When in firefights, I try to use the map to my advantage, which means I'm constantly jumping and vaulting in order to get to positions the enemy don't expect. If you're not aware, squad has a couple different ways to climb or vault over objects. The first is the two-handed climbing animation. This is the longest animation and usually allows you to get on top of tall objects like HESCO blocks or walls from a standing position. The second animation is the one-handed vault. This is a quicker vault that you'll typically see when climbing smaller walls and objects. Finally, you have a step over, the fastest animation, and it's reserved for small objects like sandbag walls. Despite what it looks like, these animations can actually be forced depending on where your player model is when pressing the space button. The two-handed climb will always initiate if you are below the object, but by simply running and jumping, you can now change where your player is in relation to the ledge, and it will initiate a one-handed vault. This can also be used to turn one-handed vaults into quick step-overs as well. Although this may seem trivial, the two-handed climbing animation locks your character for almost 4 seconds, while the one-handed animation is only 2 seconds, and the step-over is just over a second. In a game where the enemy could be anywhere and seconds matter, these animations are crucial to get right. This is especially helpful for small broken down walls like the ones you see in Korra, and I see many people get stuck in longer animations when a simple run and jump could have completely avoided that. Additionally, you can turn your player model different ways to play around with the climbing mechanism in game too, and some objects that couldn't be scaled before can now be climbed depending on your angle. And finally, this one isn't for the faint of heart, but you can also use this mechanic to save yourself when falling. By pressing space when you get next to an object, your player will initiate the climbing animation, saving you from hitting the ground. To be honest, I like to use this when scaling buildings and parkouring around maps, typically ones like Mutaha and Fallujah, where you have a lot of buildings and nearby walls. Scale a building and then jump sideways towards a wall and try to catch yourself. Out of all the tips, however, this one takes the most practice, and do make sure you have a medic nearby if you're trying it for the first time. Now onto actual combat, and this tip has to do with your grenades. Now, even though I've touched on grenades a couple times on my various guides, I still think it's worth going over again, and I have a few more tips for you guys. The max range of a grenade is about 50 meters when throwing at a 45-degree angle, and this is still the case whether you're lying prone, crouched, or standing. Additionally, although I still have a habit of doing this, the grenades sadly do not go further if you run and throw them. As much as it feels like you're adding momentum, they still will only travel the 50 meters or so before exploding from the moment it leaves your hand. To aim the grenades, you can actually use your thumb when overhanding and your pinky when underhanding. It may take some practice, but this will help grenades get into tough to reach places like windows. When it comes to underhanding nades, I typically only use this if I'm trying to get them over a close wall. As you can see, an underhand nade will land right up against the other side of the HESCO, while an overhand will simply explode before it reaches the right spot. This may be useful in some instances, but usually you want it to land at the base where people are actually standing. Additionally, these underhanded nades don't move as much, so once they do land, they're basically in that spot until they explode. Now, although this is good for enemies hidden behind a wall, it may not be the best option for enemies you want to push. When I'm attacking up a hill or berm, I actually like to use the environment to help bounce grenades into where I think the enemy is. You can do this by overhanding grenades at a slight angle to make them skid off the ground far enough away from you to explode as you push. This can be extremely confusing since players familiar with the game have an idea of how far a grenade can be thrown, and this new angle will catch them off guard. Grenades also have unique sounds, and I don't mean the sound when they explode. The RGD and F1 grenades have a distinct popping sound as they are thrown, so if you are on a faction that doesn't use this grenade and hear that sound, be prepared to run. Finally, my last tip has to deal with damage and bleeding out. It's important to know that if you receive more than 10% damage or your overall health falls below 75%, you'll start bleeding, which might explain why sometimes you fall 10 feet and are fine, whereas other times you fall 3 feet and start to bleed. Each fall does a little bit of damage, and once you do pass that 75% threshold, the bleeding begins. Try and pay attention to this, and if you have fallen a couple times but haven't taken any damage, do try to find a medic or play it a bit safer so you don't waste a bandage. When it comes to bandaging itself, I often see players immediately whip out a bandage to stop bleeding the moment they get shot. In most cases, a standard rifle shot will do roughly a third of your overall health, meaning you still have a lot of time before you bleed out, since you only actually lose 0.3 health a second. From the 75% health bleeding threshold, that means you have around 3 whole minutes before you actually die. So do take advantage of this time to clear the area and get to safety before you worry about a bandage. Additionally, bandaging is extremely loud, and good players will hear a player bandaging and move to push them. You can also use this to your advantage as well, and if you do want to try and bait someone into pushing you, you can start the bandage animation and swap back to your primary, which will initiate the sound cue. It doesn't work all the time, but it feels really good if you're able to catch someone off guard when they think they'll get the jump. And that wraps up my top infantry tips to be a better squad player. But what do you guys think? Did I miss anything? Do you have any tips yourselves? Drop me a comment below with your thoughts, and if you liked the video, give it a thumbs up and subscribe for more. But that's it for me. Until next time, peace.
I have boosters available. That was big.
So many IEDs, dude. So many IEDs.